Hello everyone and welcome again to Minimalist Gourmet, where today I'll be teaching you how to make arepitas and chulitos de yuca. If you've never had these before, these little cakes made of yuca or cassava plant can be fried and stuffed with meat or cheese. They're absolutely delicious and easy to make. Let's get started. Alright, let's take a look at our yuca, aka cassava, aka manioc. This is a tuber which has a very thick exterior bark that is covered in wax. It's not very dissimilar to a sweet potato, and don't worry, I'm going to show you 3 different methods step by step on how to break these down. First, trim off the end, and well, there we go, it's starting to look a lot more like a potato already. Go ahead and flip it around, trim off the other end, and begin cutting it down into smaller pieces. These are going to be a lot easier to manage as we go forward. The first method to remove the bark is by making a shallow cut just through the bark perpendicular to the face, as I'm doing here. Now use a knife to peel back the bark and slowly unroll it. You're going to unroll this like you're unrolling a carpet. The bark usually comes off in one complete sheet, and this is fairly clean, but honestly my least preferred method to remove the bark. My second method for removing the bark is a lot faster and simpler. Simply place your yucca piece up on your cutting board, put your knife on the edge, and slowly cut down in a sawing motion, rotating your piece in between to shave off the exterior bark, as you can see. And your third option is to simply use a vegetable peeler. This will work great, it's fast, safe, and easy. Like I said, these are very similar to handling a sweet potato. Split your peeled yucca down the middle so we can access the center because there's a vein or a woody piece that runs straight down the middle. Again, you have 3 options for how to remove this. Your first option is to make 1/2 of a V-cut just off the center. Now flip around the piece and create the other half of the V-cut. This will create a nice little wedge that you can use the tip of your knife to pry out. Probably my least favorite option, but an option nonetheless. Option number 2 is to take that half and cut it in half again, thus making a quarter. Now you're going to simply take your knife and run it up very carefully along the edge of this quarter to remove the woody portion from this yucca. Your third option is to take a small spoon and gently pry up this center woody portion and use it to scrape it out here as you push up. Quite easy and usually comes out as one solid piece. With your yucca peeled and prepped, now we need to grate it, but we want to avoid the large grater side and use this very fine side. With a little bit of elbow grease, you're going to grate all of your yucca pieces until they're completely processed. This will take just a couple minutes and honestly is probably the hardest part of this recipe. With all of our yucca grated, the last thing that we need to do before we can make our dough is remove the excess moisture. Now we're going to do this by placing a portion of our grated yucca into a clean tea towel or hand towel and using it to squeeze out all the excess moisture. Do this by gathering up each of the corners here to make a little ball, and then you're going to turn this and squeeze this into a dish to catch any of the liquid or milk that will come out of this. Now although this step is completely optional, I really like doing it as I think it creates a much better finished product. After removing the excess liquid from this batch of yucca, you're going to remove it and place it into a bowl. Continue this process in batches until you've dried out the rest of your yucca. This is what my yucca looked like after I expelled all the excess liquid. Now these balls are pretty heavy and tight, so the last thing we need to do is break this up into nice fine pieces so that we can make our dough and there aren't any lumps left. To make our dough, we're going to use 1 teaspoon of demerara sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of granulated garlic. Traditionally, 1 teaspoon of anise seeds will be used as well. Last but not least, 2 whole eggs will be cracked in before mixing really well. Now this batter is naturally completely gluten-free, so you don't have to worry about overworking it. You really do want to mix this really well and make sure everything is thoroughly integrated. Your dough should look a little bit something like this. It'll hold together fairly well, but still be somewhat moist. And on to assembly. The first thing we'll be making is what's called an arepita. This is nothing more than a small yucca cake. Couldn't be simpler. All we need to do is place a portion of our dough between our hands and press it out into a patty form. That's it, there's nothing more complicated here going on than that. Once you have it formed, put it onto a plate and set it aside as we assemble the rest of our items. Next up, we have Chulitos de Yuca con Queso. This is essentially like a fried mozzarella stick. Here I'm using a mozzarella cheese stick I've cut into 4 parts, but you can use mozzarella, cheddar, queso de frier, they all work great. Just like before, take a generous spoonful and place it into your palm. However, this time, use the spoon to spread out this dough very thin. Also, make sure there aren't any holes or any gaps in this. Now take a piece of your cheese and place it in your dough and completely wrap it closed. Now it's very important here as you're making this that there aren't any holes, gaps, or seams where the cheese can come out. Because when we go and stick this in the deep fryer and that cheese starts to melt, we want to make sure that it stays inside the chulito and doesn't come out into our oil, because that would be no good for anybody. So really just take your time here and do a good job making sure all the holes and seams are completely sealed. For our final item, we'll be making another stuffed chulito, but instead of using cheese, this time we're actually going to be using meat. That's right, I'm going to be using some cocktail sausages. You could use some sausages, hot dogs, kielbasa, anything would work. Is this traditional? Absolutely not whatsoever. Is it delicious? Well, you better believe it. And just like before, it is super simple to make these miniature Dominican-inspired corn dogs. Simply press your dough out into your hand, nice and thin with your spoon, and then go ahead and place your sausage in there and completely encase it so that there are no seams or broken spots whatsoever. And it's on to cooking. We've preheated our oil completely over medium heat, and starting in batches, we're going to begin cooking our arepitas and chulitos. Place them into the hot oil away from you so there aren't any splashes, and allow them to cook for about 5 to 8 minutes. You're going to want to turn them occasionally so that they cook evenly on all sides. And once they look a little something like this, golden brown and delicious on the exterior, you know it's time to pull. Go ahead and remove those and place them onto a paper towel lined plate so that they can drain any excess grease and cool down a little bit before we eat. And we've let these cool down here a bit before we take a look. We have our arepita here, our chulito with cheese, and our chulito with meat. Let's go ahead and take a look on the inside and see how they look. We're going to begin here with our arepita, which again was just a yuca cake and it wasn't stuffed with anything. This is nice and crispy. As you can see, there's a good bit of crunch here, and it is a nice fluffy interior. Next up is our chulito with cheese. Now these have been sat here for a while as I'm filming, so the cheese is solidified a little bit. But when these are right out of the deep fryer, oh my god, this cheese is ooey gooey and absolutely delicious. If you've ever had a mozzarella stick, well, these are like that, but just a little bit better. Finally, we have our chulito with meat. This is by far my favorite of the bunch. They are absolutely delicious and taste exactly like a very hearty corn dog. And guys, it really is just that easy to make all of these amazing items in your house tonight. If you've never had these before, I recommend you give them a try. Give these recipes a try. I know you're going to be super happy with the results. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope to see you again here real soon on Minimalist Gourmet.